welcome everyone. Thank you for registering and attending today's event, today's presentation. I think you're going to find this super exciting and really valuable. Our presenter today is Greg Gunther, and I first met Greg probably, I think it was about 6 years ago. Greg and Joshna are the co-founders of a company called Your Business Momentum in Australia. And I'll share more on that in a few minutes. But I just wanted to sort of briefly share how I met Greg, because he was a consultant to one of our TouchStone clients in Australia. And as you know, our company, Business Design Corporation, it's all about helping entrepreneurs create process-dependent businesses. And for many years, we were consulting with clients and delivering Michael Gerber's eMyth Mastery program, but we gradually morphed from a consulting company into more of a software company. While way back when, we were kind of doing similar things as Greg and Joshna are doing now. We struck up a friendship and we kept in touch. We no longer put ourselves out there as consultants, and so we're always looking for other companies to do the consulting, and especially companies that are really focused on process implementation. So in March of this year, an email from Greg popped up in my email box, and it was what caught my eye was he said, "Done for you service." And the email talked about how in 3 months, Greg's company can get a business's mission critical processes documented. And wow, I just went, wow, I have so many clients that are always saying, "Can you come and write my processes for me?" And while we kind of do that, and we have hundreds of pre-written processes in a library that you can download into your TouchStone account, it's we're always looking for coaches, companies, consultants, additional resources who can help our TouchStone clients get their processes written. And we do that because if you don't have your processes written, you can't really experience the value of TouchStone and the value of having a process-dependent business. So Greg's email describing their done-for-you service arrives in my email box, and sounded pretty interesting to me. So I got back in touch with Greg to see, is this something we can offer to our clients? And that's why we're here today. So Greg and Joshna, we're just going to be seeing Greg today. Greg and Joshna are partners in an Australian company called Your Business Momentum. One of their strengths as coaches and consultants is being able to turn that raw emotion of business ownership and the challenges that come along with it into simple tactical strategies, and ultimately to create that path to success. So turning that raw emotion into success. And unlike most consultants, and this is what I love about these guys, and what I agree with completely, is they don't sit on the sidelines and tell you what to do. They get right in there with you and walk you through it together. So you and your team can actually work with Greg to create and document your processes. And it's going to actually elevate your customer loyalty, your profitability and growth, and your business to be able to scale. So, hey, Greg, it's my pleasure to welcome you today.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's really fun to be able to present this with you. So what we're going to do, I wanted to start by asking Greg a few questions. It's going to give people who have registered time to arrive, but these are really relevant questions. So Greg, you and I'll just go back and forth. First question I have is, when you speak with entrepreneurs, what do you hear? What do they say are the biggest challenges they face when it comes to getting their processes written and implemented?
It's a really interesting question, Michael, because most people the immediate response is time. Like, I just don't have any time. But I think a lot of it is, it's knowing where to start as well with this. Like 9 out of 10 people we speak to understand the importance of having good systems. But then the majority of those people don't have systems as such. They might have started the journey, they might have done something with them in the past, but typically they're just not really getting traction at all in the business. And it's because we're busy. We don't know what we don't know, and this whole process of documenting systems is not a well understood process. And that's what we've largely, I guess, captured in this systemology approach. It's just trying to take some of the onus away from people and just have a system for documenting systems largely. So.
Yeah. One of the things I also found is that people get confused between policies and process.
Yes. Yeah, totally right.
And so that it's like, what is a process and how do you write a process? So time is still always an issue that we hear, but you're absolutely right. People don't know what a process is and how to write a process.
Correct. That's right. Exactly.
How do you address the issue? Because we get this, I need you to come into my business and observe what we do. Yeah. How do you address that?
Yeah, and look, I think I often find with this one, Michael, that that there's often a centric towards certain key people. Often the owners feel that pressure, and there is no magic bullet to this. We'll talk about this a little bit when we get into the presentation, but you'll often find that there are people doing things, but it's not well understood how they are doing those things. So it's beneficial, obviously, to come in and have a look at that. But again, it's a time issue. So it's trying to work out how best can we put that together. And we like to acknowledge and work with what we call the knowledgeable workers in this process. There are people in your business that do know what they're doing. And, if we can identify with those people and then capture what they're doing, that's a good start for us to set a base system to work from and improve upon.
Yeah, and it's so critical to capture, that's a great word, to capture that knowledge out of the brains of the people who are doing the work, especially if you bring in a rock star who, comes in with some really great processes. One of the things that we always say is that that's your intellectual proprietary knowledge. Even though they bring it, you're paying for it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing, isn't it, Michael? Because you bring in that rock star, and then what tends to happen is there's more and more focus put towards that rock star. It's work the willing horse type of attitude. But the problem is we're creating more and more key person dependency by doing that. And it's a business risk that we need to manage.
And often rock stars tend to be prima donnas and they leave, boom, like that, and boom, all that knowledge is gone. So you got to capture it.
Yeah.
Next question. My guess is that today many of the attendees are the owners of the business. So the people who are here today there are a lot of business owners. How much involvement does the owner need to take in the creation of a process-dependent business, in actually writing the processes? How much involvement does the owner have to take?
Well, this is one of the myths, Michael. Owners often feel that they have to be the ones to do it. In fact, I would argue very strongly that they're not, in fact, the best people. They'll certainly know some of the overarching business systems, if you like. But when it gets down to the nitty-gritties and the detail of certain things being done, that's where we start to rely on our people. And I had this example only a number of weeks ago where the owner basically put together what we'll share in this webinar, the critical client flow. And when we actually got to some of the knowledgeable workers, we had to change that all around because he didn't have as much of an understanding of this as he thought. So this process really doesn't involve the owners much at all. It's very much about getting to the key knowledgeable workers in the business.
So the business owner can direct it, and they have their fingers in it, but it doesn't take much of their time, right?
Not at all, no.
Okay, my last question. When you speak about your systemology process, you say you will document your mission critical systems to improve a team's efficiency. What do you mean by mission critical, and how do you feel about an entrepreneur wanting to get all of their processes written?
Yeah, and that's our tendency. We have hundreds of different systems, processes going on in a business at any one time, and that's the way we need to think of our business. Our business in its entirety is a bunch of systems and processes working together. So it's a conglomerate. So you've got, if you break that down though into its areas, you might have sales and marketing, you might have operations, you might have finance, you might have HR. So there's a number of sub areas within the business that really make up the total business, and it's all about systems processes. What we call the critical mission critical systems is the ones that are really looking out. Like at the end of the day, we're dealing with customers, right? And it's those customers that are getting exposed to the experience of dealing with us. So when we talk about mission critical, we first of all want to look out at what are the ones where we're having those moments of truth with our customer. And in this webinar, we're going to use a volunteer to work through what we call the critical client flow. We start with the critical client flow. It's the first step really in this whole process. Start with that critical client flow. And there we start to identify with all the different touch points that client is having an experience with us, a moment of truth. And if we start there and get that at least done, we've got the base upon which we can then build the rest of our processes through the business. We can start to dig deeper. So it starts there.
Yeah, and that base, I mean, one of the things, I've been doing this for more than 25 years, and that includes systematizing my own business. And, I don't have all of my processes documented, and they change all the time. And one of the things that we say is look, if there are things that you're doing that you have to do as the owner, you're not going anywhere. Those are not the most important processes to get written. The processes that you need to get written are the processes that you need to delegate, and also these mission critical processes that are going to generate revenue and profitability and consistency in your organization. But anyway, I'll shut up.
Well, it's the Pareto principle, isn't it, Michael? It's that 80-20 rule. We know that in 20%, 80% of our result is generated generally by 20% of our effort. So it's identifying, we talk mission critical, it's what are those 20%?
Right.
You can't document everything, and you don't need to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to hand it back to you. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but we're interested in questions. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end. My suggestion is to write your questions in either the chat box or the Q&A box in your Zoom. So if you scroll down to the bottom, I think it's in the bottom of most people's, you'll see a Q&A box and a chat box. And both Alex and I will be monitoring this as we're going through. Greg is leading this presentation, but I'll probably be jumping in at times with my own thoughts and comments, but Greg will mostly be leading it. If I see a question where it would really be helpful for me to interrupt Greg, I will. But if you write your questions in the Q&A or the chat box, you won't forget what the question is. And both Alex and I can look at them afterwards and read them and address them at the end of the presentation. So with that, Greg, I hand it over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Michael. And again, thank you for having us along to speak with you this afternoon.
It's a pleasure. Total pleasure.
So I think just on reflection, like if I start with a piece of reflection, we've just obviously been through quite a challenging and interesting year over the 2020. And for many of us, we're still sort of working our way through that. The observation for us as we were sort of experiencing all of that was the thinking that came about, and it was almost forced on people about reevaluating, what is important. One of the things that we've been witnessing a lot in business is the levels of stress, and certainly the last 12 months there's been no shortage of that with a lot of our business owners. I think what it's done is it's forced us to start to think about what's truly important to us. And I think I tend to be the eternal optimist, and I'm always looking for the opportunity in things. And the opportunity for me that's really coming out of this experience that we've just had and having is the ability for us to create a business that serves us so that we can go and enjoy the things that we want to do, whether that's freedom, more time with family or the like. And I've seen a lot of people really start to now place importance upon things like that. And they're now starting to get a higher appetite, if you like, or a more desire to create that sort of business. And this is where systems processes come into play, because, if we can start to have a business that's working consistently and efficiently, it starts to take a lot of that reliance away from us. So this whole area of systems and processes does become very critical in this whole equation. And, you know, for me, it's this has been a journey, just like Michael, been in business doing this stuff for 25 years. So I've been in this for around the 30-year mark. And more recently, as we've been working more and more in businesses with people, we've understood that this whole thing about systems is still a grey area, and there's a lot of myths around it. And, you know, we have done this stuff for many, many years, and, you know, we've been, I guess, struggling with getting traction on it. And I have a fundamental belief that business doesn't have to be so hard. We can have a more enjoyable life. And what we do as a business, if you like, our waking up of a morning with passion and jumping out of bed is about creating those more enjoyable lives through systems. So we've been putting a big effort into working in this space. And
yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Well, you know, and I think the big thing for us, Michael, that came out of it was this last 12 months is done for you. Like I think, you know, we've seen and experienced, as you mentioned it earlier, that, you know, people start on this journey, but it doesn't really get traction. You know, it doesn't really get right through. And this is where done for you came up for us. You know, we thought, well, let's think about done for you type services, and that's where this was born, if you like. That's where it
certainly caught my eye, Greg. And I can't tell you how many of my clients are asking me for this. So I was pretty excited to see this.
Beautiful. All right. Yeah, you brought a smile to my face when you mentioned that earlier. So, and I think, you know, and this is obviously a time we've got together, and our objective is to deliver some high value for you. There will be some of you, I guess, on this audience, and probably the majority of you, that will be wanting to basically get what you can from this. So again, just reiterating Michael's point about putting questions in the chat box and the Q&A for us. Please interact with that. We've got Alex and Lisa on board here to moderate for us, so they'll point me to those questions as we walk through. There will be some of you, though, and it will be the minority, I understand, but there will be a few of you that maybe want to go deeper with this. And what we will do as we work towards the end of this webinar is we will give you an option there to have a further chat with us. And it's just a short chat, but I'll explain a little bit more about that when I get to it. But for those of you that want to take advantage of that, certainly there is an option there for us to do that. So what we want to do in this next 30, 40 minutes that we've got together is I want to walk you through a proven process that's going to take your business from not making enough or more profits. I realise many of you are probably in profits, but again, for me, there's always an improvement. We're never at the ultimate. So for those of you that are making profits, well, I want to help you understand a process by which you can indeed make more profit. Another big one is not having enough time for you. This is something that's come through really, really strongly for us in this last 12 months. Just the amount of time that gets stolen from us by being chained to our businesses. And the other big one, of course, is being confused about these next steps, not knowing, you know, how do I go about this? Where do I start, and how do I go through it? So the ultimate we want to work through to is obviously getting that certainty and clarity. So building a business that can run without the reliance on you and often key people that you might have, and step you through how do we do that? Like, where do we start? How do we actually implement what we need to do to create that for ourselves? And what we want to do to try and help demonstrate that, we've got a volunteer. Michael's lined somebody up for us, and we're going to work through live with that person with what we call a critical client flow. And that will give you a good example of the start in this process. We will also make available that template for you to download. So if you want to walk through with us as we're doing that with the volunteer, you can feel free to do that with that download. Okay, so let's hop into that. Just get my slide. I wanted to start with 3 questions, and this is going to help us give us a sort of personal position, if you like, of where we're at this point in time. I always like to start with where are we now. You know, we need to know the base, the ground zero, if you like, of where we're starting from. So these questions help us understand that. So I want you to think about the number one issue that's sort of keeping you from having that freedom, control, and flexibility that you want or you desire in your business. It's that thing, what's the number one issue that's stopping you from taking time off away from your business? I want you to, in the chat box for us, answer the question, fill in the blank here. I'd be more comfortable leaving on a month-long holiday if only we were better at. And I want you to be quite specific on this. And if you could pop that in the chat box for us, that'd be really good, because we're going to come back to this a little bit later. So I'll give you a few moments to do that. The question you're answering, sorry, Michael, go.
I was just going to jump in here because when Greg talks about a month-long holiday, some of you may know this, but when my son was in 8th grade and he was going from 8th grade into high school, he was moving from a very small private Waldorf school to a very large high school, a high school that had gangs and thousands of people. And my wife was kind of freaked out, and she asked, what are we going to do next year for Max? You know, and I'm sort of a default to yes person. And she said at the dining room table, do you want to take a year off and take Max for a trip around the world? And so I said yes. And we took 14 months off and we traveled around the world. And I came back to a business. I mean, my business was pretty well systematized. It's not like I had, I was absolutely incommunicado during that time, but my business was systematized enough that I came back 14 months later and, you know, things were still humming along. And, you know, this is something you can do if you have a systematized business. It's not just a month, but imagine if Greg or I came up to you and said, hey, we've got 2 tickets to go to climb Mount Kilimanjaro on Thursday of next week. You want to go? Would you be able to just drop at a moment's notice and take off? I mean, what would that be like to be able to go away for a month or 2 months or 14 months and still have a business that survived? So that's the possibility. So I just wanted to give you some inspiration there, because it can be done. I've done it myself.
It's really quite interesting, isn't it? Like we just feel so tied to our businesses to be able to get away, and often when we do get away, Michael, we're still in the business anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
We've got the phone by us, or we're getting calls from our team, or whatever. It's not really a break at all. So we're getting some responses here, like it's completing simple routine tasks. That's a good one, and that's pretty typical. Thanks, Travis, for that. And we've got getting the right people in place, maintaining culture, understanding the role and follow through. So thank you for those pieces of feedback. If there's any more there, feel free to pop those in, because I'm sure there's plenty. If only, you know, I'd be more comfortable leaving my business if only I were better at. So the second question I want to ask is, on a scale, think of that number response that you gave to that first question, and on a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to understand or rate, if you like, how much is that stress causing you or concerning you on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 being that it doesn't matter or bother me at all, or at the other end of the scale, obviously at 10, it's the most important issue for me to deal with and it's killing me. So I've opened up a poll there, and I want you just to put in your rating on the poll for me. I'll give that 30 seconds and we'll just close that off, and we'll see what responses we're getting.
And don't think we're setting you up here, guys. We're not setting you up. It's just so important to be conscious of what's going on in your business when you're thinking about what business could be like, because your business, it should be fun coming to work. It shouldn't be stressful, and it shouldn't be killing you. Well, the whole point of owning a business, we used to say this when we were delivering the E-Myth Mastery, is to get more of what you want from life. And we used to have this great exercise that was called the primary aim, where you would ask someone and go through a worksheet, what do you want from life? And this is something that a lot of people rarely ever answer. So it's just really important to be conscious here and be honest and say, like, is this what you wanted? Did you want to create a business that consumed you and took away your time and felt like you were completely out of control, or did you have a different idea when you first started your business?
Okay, so I've just closed the poll there and you should see the results. Michael, you might just confirm me those results coming up.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So we've got so it's sort of sitting in that 7 or 8. We've got a couple there, obviously, that it's not causing great concern to, but we've still got a number of people there where it is concerned. We've got one where it's killing me. So if, in fact, we've got another third.
So, I'd be interested, Greg, if the person, if anybody who put a score in of 1 or 2, just throw in the chat box, how did you do that? I mean, I'd love to look at that anyway. I won't bring it up, but curious to know where you're at. How did that happen? Is that because you're not trying to grow your business, or have you already systemized things? That'd be sort of cool.
Could have already systemized. Maybe they've got the right people in place as well.
Yeah.
It's so that's great that we're getting some of those responses as well. But the majority are certainly up there on the other end of the scale. Yeah. Okay, I'll close that one down. We have one more question, and it's a poll again. I want to ask you the question. Think about that number 1 issue that's bugging you, and on a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to address just how urgent is it that I address this issue. Is it something that I can put off till 2025, or is it something that I should have been working on back in 2019 and it's already 2021? Where are you on that? 10 means urgent. 1 means not as much. So just vote your answer in the poll for me, and we'll give that another sort of 20 seconds or so, and we'll see what the responses come back in at. Okay, all coming in, that's great. Just another 10 seconds.
Yeah, sorry, Greg, I'm typing and answering some questions here in the Q&A. So
it's fine, thanks. And just flag any for me, Michael, as they come through. If you want me to in the Q&A, I can certainly go back and address them.
Yeah, there's a great one that we got earlier that I'll wait for the end from Roland. It's a great one about, I'll wait for it. It's a good one.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll give that just a couple more seconds. Still got a couple coming in. And I'm closing it now. Okay, so we've got all 5s and aboves.
Great.
So obviously it's an issue for many, and we've got a couple there sort of in that 8, 9, and 10. So what have we got there? 6, 10. So obviously it's for a lot of you. This is an issue, mission critical issue that you're wanting to address fairly soon. So again, in this webinar, what I'm wanting to do is to give you some framework for that, and certainly when we get to the critical client flow, that'll give you a bit of an understanding where you can start with the process. But for those of you who do want to have a chat later on, we'll set up a sort of a call where we can do that and talk about it some more. All right, we'll close that down. So where I want to go to now is just thinking about this issue of the problem. And what I'm just going to challenge you with here is looking at your responses that you've given us. And there were things like, having that control, having people in place, all of these sort of things that you are raising. The challenge I've got for you is that they're really symptoms. They're symptoms of other stuff that's going on deeper inside of your business. And the problem usually is not that. In fact, there's a lovely saying I heard a while back, and I forget who quoted it, but the saying goes something like this. It's the problem is not the problem. The problem is the way we're thinking about the problem. Because often what we're seeing on the surface is symptoms. And what we need to do as owners is to start to peel the onion layer back a little bit and dig down further as to understanding what that is. In our experience, all the things that you've listed are really reflective of probably 1 of 3 or 4 things. It's often that you don't have a system, whether that's about attracting customers, closing sales, raising invoice, whatever. Or if you've got a system, it's not effective. So what that says to us is that, we don't really have people consistently using a system. Or it could be that they're not using it properly or consistently. One of our favorite things is if something goes wrong in our business, we often turn to the person or people and ask them, what went wrong. 85% of stuff that goes on in business is about process, and it's usually the process that's let us down. So it could be that we're just not using the system properly, or it's often a combination of the above. So, I've experienced all of these things, but both sides. I've seen businesses, and including our own, like Michael talked about him systemizing his own business. We have to eat our own dog food. It's important that we understand from both sides what this means. And I know in our business, for example, where we've gone through and we've done this, the efficiencies that we've been able to realize have been quite significant. We know that in any business at any one time, there's anywhere between 25 and 40% of efficiency gains that can be had by improving systems. So there is an opportunity there to do it. So basically, I think what we need to understand is what the real problem is. What we're seeing is symptoms, and we need to understand, and dig below and understand what the real problem is. I want to explain it in this way. Like basically, what we've done so far on our journey today is we've looked at where we're at now. And what we know is that typically businesses are in one of four stages. And I just want to explain those stages to you now. The first stage is survival. And the thing about survival is that, it's not such a great place to be. We're finding that, we're often in firefighting. We have a team, if we do have a team indeed, that we don't like process, or there's no consistency. The thing we do know at survival stage is it's just not scalable either. It's basically a situation where we feel like we're just on this treadmill and we're just going round and round and round. And for many of us, there'll be elements and times in our life in business where I'm sure we've felt this with that. If there's anything else you can add, so I'm sure we've all experienced this from time to time. I'd be interested in people's comments, Michael, on in the chat box, just what other sorts of things do they see or have experienced when they're in survival mode. But the thing we know is when we're in survival mode, the bottleneck is usually with the owner. This is a business that tends to be very centric and operational around the owner. And because of that, it's often that letting go. We find one of the biggest struggles we have in this stage is the letting go. And, we find ourselves almost at a point where we're totally micromanaging everything.
I have something to add to this. It just popped in my head now, Greg. I had some renovation done on my house, and I had it all painted. And the painting guy was talking to the painter, and he was complaining about how he never got home to see his family because after he did all of his painting, he had to go home and do all of his paperwork. And basically I said to him, well, first of all, you shouldn't be doing paperwork. And second of all, you shouldn't be doing painting. You own the company. And he said, I can't afford to do that. And so I think when people get into this survival mode, they can't see the opportunity ahead of them.
Yes.
And there is an opportunity because they think they have to do it all, and they can't afford to hire someone to do what needs to be done. And so they start doing this like very inexpensive, crazy work like invoicing. It's just crazy, but I don't know if you want to say anything to that. But
look, no, you're spot on, Michael. Like, I think we've all been guilty of this at times, but it's just that it's almost control. Like you just feel like, well, if it needs to be done, I might as well do it myself. But what you're creating, if you think that through for its second and third consequences, you're actually teaching your team that I don't need to worry about it. The owner, I will do it. The owner will do it for me. So they're not getting any growth. They're not getting any level of, satisfaction about taking on extra responsibility or anything like that. So we're actually creating a business that becomes more and more reliant on us when we're in this stage. The second stage is what we call stationary. So, in this stage, we've broken through, and we are sort of feeling and seeing a level of growth. And, you know, we have created, by this stage, we've often created a few team members around us, and it's those team members that start to, you know, work out, if you like, how they need to do things in their own space. So they start to create their own sort of processes around that. The thing we find in this stage is that it's better than survival, obviously, but it's still not a great place, because what happens is we start to still find certain people in our business that we become very dependent upon. So where we've got small teams, particularly in small teams, we will find ourselves becoming very reliant. Michael, you referred to it earlier as the rock star. You know, the rock star in our business, and, you know, we start to feel very reliant upon them. But, you know, imagine the situation if that rock star decides they want to leave and go somewhere else. What does that create for us? So it's still not the best place. It's actually this stage where we have the opportunity to capture, extract a lot of what's being done in the business. So
let me give you an example of that, Craig.
You go for it.
We had a situation. We had an HVAC company who had a rock star as a tech, and we interviewed the rock star, the owner of the business, the rock stars. His name was Kyle. So Kyle's immediate boss, and Kyle and myself, we got together, basically doing what Greg does, and we interviewed him. This was very specific. It wasn't quite what Greg does. It was very specific, but we interviewed Kyle from the moment he gets a lead to what he does, and we recorded it. And then I took the recording and I broke it down into sections and created a process for the owner to then, and we actually put it into TouchStone, and then the owner trained all the rest of the techs. And his sales went up tenfold or something like that. It was like 7 or 8, but it exponentially boosted his results because now they were following the process that the rock star had. So a lot of times you get these rock stars, and the process the owner goes, "Oh, I bow to you. You're so great." But take that information and give it to the other people so that everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Extract that knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. I was taught very early in my career, Michael, that one of the biggest measures of success for us as a leader is the growth in our people that are working with us. And, you know, I learned to experience the satisfaction that you get from that, because you see them leaning into their work. They're enthusiastic about what they do. They feel like they've got a responsibility, that they're helping make a difference. And, you know, I think more and more we need to start thinking like that as a leader, rather than thinking like we have to do it all. I'd be also, and feel free as I'm talking here through the chat box as well, if you've got other thoughts around having experiences in this space, I'd be interested in your thoughts about what you witness in each of these areas. The next stage is what we call scalable. So scalable is a position where we've obviously broken through now to a point where the business is growing. What we do know though is that at this stage it's a better stage, but we find that we may well have systems at this point, but they're often hard to find. They might be buried somewhere in some software, or maybe they're in hard copy. Like we've been in hundreds of different businesses over time, and we often will see, you know, do you have systems? And the response will be, well, yes, we do. But then we go and find them, and they're often, you know, hard copy somewhere buried in the business. And, you know, when you do a bit of an audit as to how well those systems are being followed, they're not really being followed much at all. So we find here that, you know, whilst there might be some systems done, there hasn't been a lot of training done around those systems. So we still don't have that sort of consistency that's going on in the business. And, you know, we find ourselves as owners often having to remind people about those systems and processes being used. You know, did you follow the system? And, you know, it's just that constant sort of reminder. So often by this stage too, we might well have some software like, you know, TouchStone is for us a very critical piece of software to help us manage that. So you may well have something like TouchStone there now. But again, it's that sort of compliance, if you like, or that use of that software. And Michael, when we've been chatting previously, has often commented to me about, you know, people have the software, but they're not really getting utilization of the software. because there's a lot of functionality in there that's just not being used, and that's typically what we find in this stage. So the opportunity here for us is to start to get organised around the knowledge that we've got in our business. So we've extracted a lot of that knowledge, but what we want to do here is we want to basically start to organise that and start to set up training around a lot of these systems that we've got. So in our onboarding, for example, if we're recruiting, one of the parts of the onboarding would be training them around those critical systems that they have influence over, if you like. So it becomes embedded in our business process. Michael, I don't know if you've got anything you want to add to that, but
well, one of the things I do want to add, and then there's a question that I think someone asked that I think it's worth answering here. But one of the things I want to add is that as you move into scalable, there's a cycle that starts to happen, and that cycle is what I like to call innovate, document, implement. Innovate, document, implement, and that's the cycle. So we're implementing our processes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to look at those processes and innovate them, because if we're following a process, we're going to be getting an expected result. There will be a baseline to the process. If I have 10 people that are coming in as leads, I make a qualification call. 7 of those, if I follow the qualification call process, maybe 7 go to the next step. That then becomes the baseline. So that's the implementation of a process, but now we sort of innovate it. We get together as a team and we say, well, could we do it faster? Or can we leave steps out? Or can we do processes simultaneously? Or what are you saying and what am I saying? And we innovate the process, then we document those changes and we implement the changes and we get a better baseline. It's kind of like A/B testing, you know, when you're doing Google ads or something like that. But this is where that cycle starts to happen as you start getting your baseline results happening. Is there anything you want to add to that, Greg, before I ask you this question?
No, I think you've nailed that perfectly, Michael.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the questions here is, sounds like a company needs to be in the stationary growth stage to really develop systems. It's kind of a good point.
Yeah, it is a great point, and thanks, Roland, for raising that. The thing we find in the survival stage is that you find that it's often very centric around the owner. And in survival stage, there's probably not a lot of capability or capacity to really tap into some of the other knowledge. So you're still forming a lot of the knowledge. It's not to say that you can't systemize at that stage, but it's, I guess, a little more difficult in the survival stage because you're on that sort of hamster wheel, and you're really going round and round and round, and you're being very reactive to everything. So to actually break that cycle, we need to sort of free that bottleneck, if you like, and usually that's taking a step towards building some people with us. Like we typically say for systemology, for example, in that sort of 4+ employee category, where you've got a number of employees that are working with you. That's not to say that you're still in stationary. You might still be sort of oscillating back and forth. I don't think these stages are necessarily discrete. I think we often do go back and forth between them. Certainly over the last 12 months, I've seen people jump back into survival through necessity over the last 12 months. But, they've sort of come from stationary back into survival, and we move from survival back into stationary. Roland, I'm not sure if I've answered your question adequately there, but
I've got one thing to add to that, Greg. I think almost every business goes through survival mode. I mean, it's not bad to be in survival mode. What's bad is when you're unconscious to survival mode. When you're in survival mode, you should be paying attention to those things that you shouldn't be doing.
Yes.
You should be conscious of those low value tasks that you could, if you created a process, a very simple, quick process that you could then delegate to someone else to start removing those bottlenecks gradually. So when you're in survival mode, recognize it. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. Recognize that you're the bottleneck. Look for the ways that you can open up those bottlenecks and name them And then you create a path towards getting into that stationary zone. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with being in survival mode. It's what happens to almost all of us as we're growing.
We've all experienced it, Michael, and probably will again on occasion. So for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Michael, there's just one in the chat with your Innovate document again. They're just looking for the order to just repeat, if you can just repeat.
So once you've got your processes rolling, you've got that, you're running a process. So you've actually implemented a process. Another word for implement is train. So if people are following your process, the next step is to innovate. So innovate is to talk about it, try to figure out what could we change, what could we make, what could we do to make it better. So now people are throwing out ideas, and then you're going to document those changes, and then you're going to implement those changes. So it goes innovate, document, implement, and then cycle back. Innovate, document, implement, and cycle back. It's boom, boom, boom. 3 steps, and that's going to go on for the life of your business. It's not something that happens in the first, in a month or anything like that. It's like what you always do once you get to scalable and moving on. That's the life of your business, is innovation.
And I think what you're raising there is, the whole concept of Kaizen, or continuous improvement.
Right.
Once we get to a stage, we don't want to just stay there. The thing we realize once we've documented something is that we will identify ways that we can improve upon that. And we need to keep that cycle going, which is really, this is really for me the nirvana, the holy grail, if you like, is moving a business through into this next stage of saleable. And, the feedback I often get when I raise this is people say, oh, I don't want to sell my business. And that is probably right. I often say to people, you may not want to, but by definition, a saleable business is one that's operating largely without you, and it's still growing. This is really the holy grail, as I say. When you get to a saleable stage, you've got a business that's got complete business reliability. It's just there, and it's producing consistent results. And the thing we know at this stage too is, and this is speaking to your point, Michael, we're optimizing. We're going through that cycle that you're talking about. So it's implement, document, innovate, implement, document. So we're just going through that cycle over and over. At this point, we're optimizing is what we.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about being in this stage is that you don't have to sell. Because your business is so valuable. Now is when your business becomes like this money-making machine, and you're profitable, and there's consistency, and you've got time, and you're calling in for the numbers from the British Virgin Islands. If you've got that, who needs to sell?
Totally
the only challenge there is if there's some massive risk breakdown. But the thing is that now you wait for someone to pay you what you want for your business. It's a beautiful place.
Yep, and I've had many experiences with this where people have had that money offer and thinking at the time that, or prior to that was going to be their ultimate exit, only to make a different decision. So, you know what, I've created something now that's so good, why would I want to sell? So
yeah.
You're at a point of choice when you get to this stage. I just want to quickly run through this model because I think it talks a lot about the way we start to think about, or the way we're often thinking about businesses. The question from your earlier answers, many of you are sort of prioritizing this as an issue for you, but the question then becomes, well, why haven't we done anything about it? And this is the way we typically think. I feel like, and I love this sort of model of the iceberg because it does talk a lot about, where we're at when we're starting to look at this. So many of you have probably tried to systemize in the past. And 9 times out of 10, maybe you've felt like it hasn't really gone anywhere for you. What we often find is that we see tools, software, things like TouchStone, and we think they're going to be the magical answer. Michael said earlier that, and we've been chatting previously, that, people who have purchased our software in the past are not getting full utilization of that because they haven't really gone through the whole process of what TouchStone provides. And, the reason we got in contact with Michael, 6 years or so ago was the software itself is very, very powerful. And, if it's used to its full use, can do a lot for us. but that's only the tip of the iceberg, and it's not TouchStone necessarily that's going to shift your business. What will shift your business, as is using this iceberg analogy, what will actually shift our business is creating something like certainty. And what we mean by certainty is that it's having those systems and processes available to any team member. We're not dependent on any one team member, let alone the owner. And the key to this stage is really documentation. We need to make sure that we're extracting and documenting all of our key processes, and that takes that reliability away and creates certainty for us. The second important point here that's going to shift this iceberg or our business is performance. Now, this is really where we're starting to talk about the behaviours, activities of our team members. We want to start to have them making sure that we're getting the types of behaviours and outcomes, if you like, that we are wanting. So this is about measurement. It's about understanding what is going on inside of our business and that we're getting the level of performance that we want. And the third one's really important, buy-in. This is one we find a lot of people struggle with. They might have the systems and processes there, but we're just not getting the buy-in from our team. And this is where we start to really identify culture. We get what we accept in our businesses, and our culture is largely dependent upon what we're wanting to create. And this buy-in is all about trying to get people using and buying in to the systems and processes that we've got inside of our business. If we've got all those three things, what we know we can create out of that is what we call complete business reliability. And basically complete business reliability by its definition, complete means that it's covering all the aspects of our business. And business reliability is that everything is going to plan and performing as we want it to be. So if you think about that, that's really the Holy Grail. That's really what we are trying to achieve. And as owners of our businesses, we need to start thinking below this waterline. We need to start to think about all these other areas. And then things like TouchStone software and the other tools will be able to be fully utilised and help take some of the efficiencies or drive some of the efficiencies that we're looking for inside of our business. Anything you want to add on that, Mike? Because I know you do that. Yep.
No, let's keep going, Greg.
Okay,
Cool. The innovate, document, implement was kind of key there, and I think I'd really like to see this next step. So this is great. I think people are going to love this.
So now I'm going to and Michael, you had a volunteer. Have we checked?
I do. So Alex, can you unmute Travis? Travis Gray. Travis, are you with us?
I'm still here.
Okay, great. Hey, Travis. Good to see you.
Travis, lovely to meet you.
Can I turn my video on, or?
Oh, you can if you like. Be good to see you.
It doesn't matter. I didn't see where to do that, but.
Should be, there's a little video thing, little icon video. But it's not.
Is it in the bottom there, Travis? It's no big deal because it's.
Yeah, I don't see one, but anyway, we'll go ahead.
That's
Okay.
right.
Go for it.
We'll keep going. Travis, thank you for volunteering, and I'm going to walk you through this process. Just give me a little bit of background, Travis, if you would, just quickly on what you do, your business, and what we're going to be stepping through here.
I lost you for a second.
Just a little bit of background, Travis, on your business, what you do.
We're a general contractor. We do roofing, foundation repair, and just general construction. We primarily focus on the insurance industry because here in Texas we get a lot of storms, tornadoes, and hail and stuff like that. So we do a lot of insurance restoration. Okay.
So Travis, thank you for that. Who would be your target client? You just mentioned insurance there. Do you consider the insurance industry a client, or is it the clients of the insurance industry? What would you target?
The clients of the insurance industry. So our ideal customer is kind of the middle class neighborhoods, families in middle class neighborhoods.
Okay. All right. Beautiful. And for that ideal client, Travis, what would be the product or service that you would consider is your ideal for that?
Our primary would be insurance, storm restoration. So it would be storm restoration with insurance.
Okay. So storm restoration, yep, beautiful. Thanks. I've just got Alex documenting this for us, Travis, as we walk through. Now, you've already said we get fed a lot of these leads, prospects from insurance companies. That's correct?
We don't get fed a lot of them from insurance companies. We work with insurance agents, realtors,
okay.
and industry.
So insurance agents. So we typically find these people through insurance agents, realtors. You said.
Yep.
Realtors. Anybody else? Anywhere else? Website, social media.
Yeah, we got our website, and then we do canvassing.
Mm-hmm.
Canvassing is a big one.
Okay.
Door to door.
Righto. Okay, so you're doing door-to-door work. So that's about awareness, I guess, that people get to know of your service.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. And Travis, when you get this inquiry, how does it typically come in? Is it a phone call? Is it an email?
Typically, it's a phone call.
Uh-huh. And when that phone call comes in, what's the process? Is it a qualifying process that you do? Is it, what actually happens if I'm ringing you?
Yeah, we do a little bit of a qualifying process there, a little needs assessment, just kind of seeing what it is, the issue that they're having, get them to explain to us what's going on. And, like if they had a storm issue, with a weather event, typically that's either they need emergency repairs, the roof's leaking, or they've actually got an issue that needs to be addressed immediately.
So we've gone through the qualifying process then, Travis, and I've got a situation I'm needing your services. What happens next for me?
We'll schedule an appointment for somebody to come out and actually do a physical site survey on the property.
Okay, so a site survey. And then what happens next? Travis, you've done the site survey.
Typically, we'll call in an insurance claim on it and get the claims process started.
Okay, so claims process. And what happened, like we've got the claim process, so the insurance company has approved the claim. Is that when you get paid, Travis?
No, typically we'll get paid after the job is complete. So we'll
deliver. So the next stage would be delivering the job. So
yeah.
Is there anything between the claims process? Like is the claims process approved and then you do the job? Is that your trigger, if you like, to start the job?
Yeah, basically, once we go out and do our initial inspection, we'll call in the insurance claim. The insurance company will come out, do a damage assessment, mm-hmm. and then typically we'll have to reassess the property at that point again, and get everything the insurance company didn't pay for documented for the customer, because the claims process is just a little bit of a back and forth process.
Yeah, so this is a good example, Travis, and it's a good one that you're raising, because what we're finding here is the overarching process that you've described is the claims process, but we have a lot of sub-processes, obviously, that go back and forth, as you say, at this point. So, you talked about gathering other information, probably having to go back to site again. So they're all sub-processes that really sit in underneath this claims process.
Hey, Travis, do you have progress payments? Do you get a deposit and a progress payment, or do you have to wait to get cash till the end of the job?
We actually take the first insurance check as our down payment. Typically, that'll be somewhere around anywhere from 50 to 70% of what the job's going to be.
Does that happen before you start the job?
Yeah, we collect that before we start.
So progress payment, we'll call that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Now I'm just interested, Travis, in the next stage. So we've gathered all the information. We've certified the insurance company. We've obviously received a progress payment. I think you said that was about 50%. What's the next stage, Travis?
Well, we'll do the paperwork I guess I should have got that in there. When we do the claim, when we start the claims process, as soon as they get approved for their insurance claim, then we'll fill out a job folder and get all the information, all their selections for the different products that we're putting on to determine what we're going to be replacing and replacing it with.
So it's and all that's contained within a job folder, is it?
Yeah, it all goes into a job folder, and then that comes back in-house, and then we'll start doing the production process where we're scheduling the contractors and scheduling the repairs to get done and everything.
Okay, so so the onboarding, Alex, is to complete the job folder. And then the delivery is where we're starting to schedule all of the contractors and obviously there's probably products, supplies you need as well, Travis, in that as well.
Yeah.
So schedule
all materials and schedule everything.
Yeah, okay. Now, job's complete, we've done the job, Travis. What's sort of that final, is there a handover process that you have, or what physically happens?
So when you're talking about the actual completion of the job?
Yes, Travis.
So once we get the job completed, then we'll go out and fill out a certificate of occupancy, do an inspection on the property. Not a certificate of occupancy, I'm sorry, certificate of completion.
Certificate of completion, okay.
Yeah, and make sure the customer is happy. We'll try to see if we can get reviews.
And then reviews.
Any referrals, things like that also.
Use referrals, okay. Perfect. Thank you, Travis. And for everybody that's watching and listening, what we've stepped through in this process with Travis is what we call a critical client flow. And we said earlier that what we want to start the whole systemization journey of your business with is this one. And you can see, we know that business is a conglomeration of a lot of systems processes. And what we've done here, you can see we've got, call this sort of where we're getting outreach, if you like, or getting people getting to know about us. So that's, call that our marketing, if you want to call it that. We've then got the inquiry coming in. We've probably got some admin and sales at this point. In terms of the money side of it, the progress payment, we've got some of our finance potentially involved in that point. And then we start to move to the job, which is probably moving towards the operations in our business. And then we've got probably some more finance, admin, and potentially some more marketing. So what we identify in our critical client flow is all of these different touch points. These are the moments of truth, we call them, that the client is going to have their experience with us. And it's at each one of these stages that we want to create the best possible experience for our client, because we know that we slip up on any one of these things, then potentially that's going to rate our whole experience a poor one. So we might do really, really well in one area, but poorly in another, and that's going to influence the overall overarching client experience. Now, this is not to say this is all the processes. So we identified, as we walk through here with Travis, there's a lot of sub-processes. These are what we call the overarching processes. And then there's a lot of sub-processes that sit in underneath all of these. And as the journey continues, we would be wanting to capture a lot of those sub-processes. But using the 80-20 rule, what we first and foremost want to identify is what are the 20% of things that we capture that are going to provide us with 80% of, in this case, the client experience. And once you've completed this part, and this really forms the basis, if you like, or the scope by which you would start doing your process and systems documentation. Once you've done this, you can then move forward into the specific departments. You do exactly the same in finance or exactly the same in HR as you develop. So, and this is effectively the journey. So it looks like this. If I just stop that share and I'll go back to my presentation. Travis, thank you so much for that. That was very, very good. You walked through that brilliantly for me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'll just go
Thanks,
back.
Travis.
Just go back to our presentation, and there, and there. And so basically what I'm showing you here is the 7-step process, if you like. This is really how we do it. And what we've talked about, the journey starts with what we're calling here the critical client flow. That's what we stepped through with Travis just now. And basically we've captured for Travis his ideal client, his ideal service or product, and the journey that the client is going to do. And then the journey continues around these 7 steps as we go. Michael, anything you want to add to any of that? Really appreciate Travis for volunteering for that.
Yeah, so the only thing I would say is that on that second, if you go back to that one slide, the department roles, responsibilities, I mean, this is such a key thing because these are the people who know how to do that different work that happens in the organization. They're going to be the ones who are actually going to be writing the systems with you guys. So, yeah. I mean, there's more to talk about in this slide, but my guess is that you'll go into more detail on this, Greg, with people who want to follow up with you and do those calls. Totally. So,
yeah, exactly, yeah. Michael. So, and we might move to that because I'm conscious of time and I see Roland's already had to leave. So we might just quickly roll through to just asking people this question. If they're ready to fix it right now. So this is really just reflecting on our answers that we gave to those first 3 questions. We identified the key issue, the specific issue. We identified just how much stress that or an issue it is. We rated the stars of the issue, and we then rated the urgency of that issue. And I just want to, this is where I want to invite people. And while I'm doing this, Lisa, you might just in the chat box, I did promise people that we would give them the template for the CCF. I noticed we didn't put that link up. So if people want to get that download, they can. And there it is there now. It's come up in the chat box. So I just want to ask you this question. This is really just a yes, no. If I want you to basically identify with yourself just whether or not this is an issue that you feel that you need to address. So if the answer is no, what you're really saying by saying no is that it's not as big a deal. And there were some of you, I noticed with your ratings, that it wasn't as much of a deal. So your answer is probably going to be no. The other part of no is that it's not a priority for this year. So if it's not something that you have to get onto this year, then absolutely your response would be no. And I'd say for you, if you're in this category, probably it's not something that we would necessarily add any value for you at this point in time. So, and hopefully, you've got some value from today's webinar and that. Alternatively, though, if you're a yes, and this is where I want to invite you to just pop in the chat box for us, but a yes would mean basically the issue is very significant for you. It is something that you do want to address, and it's something you want to get on top of this year. So, if this issue is starting to burn and you need to get on top of it in this year, then maybe, just maybe, it's worth having a chat. Now, if you just type for us a yes in the chat box, in the Q&A box, sorry, what we will do, the process will be, we will send you a link to book a 15-minute call with us. And in that 15 minutes, we just want to help, as Michael just alluded to a moment ago, we want to go into a little bit more depth as to what's involved in this. And the idea being that, if this is something then that you want to go further with, we would book a longer call with you and start to really scope out how we can work forward with that. So if it's a yes for you, if it is an issue that's causing you great stress, if it's a top priority for this year and you think that it'd be worth a 15-minute call with us, then please type yes into the box, and we'll send you an email and you can book a call with us and we'll walk that through with you. So that's really where I wanted to go with that, Michael. Are there any other questions that popped up?
Yeah, there's some good questions. Let me just look at this one. Roland asked a question early on. I understand the concept of using your team to write processes, but shouldn't processes be in place before you hire your team?
Good point. So that is a really good question. So the issue often with having them in place beforehand is if we're employing people with certain levels of skills and capability, chances are they're going to do it better than us anyway. So, you know, we want to tap into people's skills, capabilities, and this is how we can capture really good systems. This is probably a thought process where the owner feels like they've got to know everything that's going on in their business. And the reality is we are not the best people usually to be doing that. You know, we have certain skills, like entrepreneurs, frankly, are not really good and strong around detail. They're more forward-looking, visionary type people, and that's what they do best. When it comes to, you know, really sort of creating an invoice or, you know, doing a particular job on site, they're usually not the best people to be doing that. There's a really great story with Henry Ford. Like Henry Ford, back in years gone by, invited a heap of journalists into his office, and he said, "You can ask me any question, and I'll be able to answer it for you." And the journalists saw that as an opportunity really to show him up. But the very first question I got asked was quite a specific one about the manufacturing of the T model Ford. And he picked the phone up, and the journalist said, "Well, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm not the right person to answer that. I've got people on that are better than me to do that." And it's a great story, and that's what it's like. So we don't necessarily have to have all the systems up and running before we're employing people.
Sure, but the other thing I would say to that is that if you're in that survival mode, there are probably some processes that you do that you can't hire someone really to do. Well, you can, but it's so much better if you do know how to do it. Just take a few minutes, write down the process so that you can delegate the process instead of abdicating responsibility for that task.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, write a simple process down, give it to that person to follow. And if you've hired someone who sort of knows how to do it, they can contribute to that process and make it even better for you. But you don't have to have all of your processes written before you hire a team. So, yeah.
And I think the other important point you're raising there, Michael, which is a good one, is start with what you're already doing. We don't have to create an ideal process. It's start with what we're already doing. And it's from that we can improve. So at least we've got it captured.
Yeah, there's another comment that Roland said, "I'm in the survival stage and I've hired employees, but it didn't turn out well. Yeah. I believe the lack of processes was the issue." Yes.
Yeah.
And it's also not even just the lack of processes for the position that you hired, but he probably didn't have a recruiting process, a hiring process, a training process, an evaluation process, an onboarding process. And these, by the way, are all processes that are pre-written in our general process library that you can download and implement right away. So, yeah.
That's a really good point, Michael. And I missed it as we were going through. Like within TouchStone, you do have a lot of templates already. So we can head start, we can jump start a lot of this. And I'd suggest people absolutely. The other really important thing, Michael, with that, without labouring, is role clarity. Often when we're recruiting in survival mode, we're in survival, so we just recruit and put somebody on to do the job. There's no real role clarity, and that's often why people leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was another question. What I'm hearing is even in this stage, which I think he was talking about towards the end of your wave there, when you bring a team on, at that point, the team will add to the process as well. Yeah, it's that whole idea of innovate, document, implement. Yeah, you're always adding to the processes.
Totally. It's a learning journey.
Yeah. Let me just see if there were anything else. How detailed should processes be? Should they cover every step?
Yeah, good question. And I think the first thing I would say is that we don't have to document every process in our business. And then the other point I would make is that if you have firstly the overarching process, and then that overarching process can then break down into its sub-processes. And it's just not necessarily taking every single step, because you can't systemize everything. So, you know, there is an element of expertise, if you like, that we don't want to take away from people that have got their own personal flair. So we want to systemize it to the point where it will run our business, but not to the point where it will stop our business. So So it's the detail that you go into doesn't necessarily mean to be right down to the nth degree. It's really just trying to capture the critical piece in that process. So it's step one, do this. Step two, do that, but not down to the really minute, fine detail of each of that.
The way I often answer that question is that I have a sort of a 3-stage rule. The 30,000-foot view is usually the first place where I start with writing a process, and it's just quick, broad strokes. Do this, do this. I think it's this, and this, and it's not very detailed at all. And sometimes that's all you need when you're training someone, those broad strokes. But let's say that Greg's my new salesperson. I'm just hiring. I'm running through the process, and I'm saying, well, first you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. And he goes, well, how do you get from this step to that step? That's when I realize, oh, I need more detail there. Let's put a little bit more detail into that. And that's what I kind of call the 15,000-foot view, where I created this 30,000-foot view. Now I'm training Greg, and he points out some weaknesses in the steps that don't quite make sense. It doesn't quite follow.
Yes.
But then Greg says, bingo, I got it. And then he goes out and he messes it all up. And that's what I call boots on the ground, where I sit down with Greg and I say, Greg, are you following the process? And he goes, yeah, I'm following the process. And it tells me to do this. And that's when I go, oh, yeah. And then you can add a little bit more detail to the process. But if you get bogged down in trying to get boots on the ground, all that detail into writing a process, when you're just starting, you're never going to get your processes implemented. You're going to spend all your time writing detail. So keep it as simple as possible, and then add to it and add to it and add to it.
I love the way you've described that, because to me, we often seek perfection, and the problem with perfection is that we'll do nothing. So, with systems and processes, for me, if they're 75, 80% of the way there, then launch.
I say use the concept of it's good enough. Just do it, and then we'll add to it later on.
Yeah, agree. I just see Ashley with the 20% signifier. That might have been the 80-20 rule, was it, perhaps?
Yeah, that's what I was guessing.
I'm not sure if Ashley's still on, but Ashley, if you are, what we're talking about with 80-20 is that 20% of anything that we do. So, Michael's just using a sales analogy. So we typically find with sales that 20% of what a salesperson's activity is will generate 80% of their results. So what we want to identify is what are those 20% of things that a salesperson can do. So it might be number of sales calls, or it might be the number of follow-up calls they make. So there's some critical activities that we are seeking from them in that 20% to generate 80% of the result. I hope that clarifies that for you.
So I guess, are there any more questions? I'm not seeing any more questions.
I haven't seen any.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Greg, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and we will be sending this recording out. So if anyone wants to approach Greg, you can contact me, or you can Greg's contact information is there, and I'll make sure that you get in touch with him. And so, Greg, thank you, and thank you, Alex and Lisa. Really appreciate everybody. It's a great presentation, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you again for having us, and thanks, Alex and Lisa, for backing me up there. And we do have a couple of responses there, so we'll be following up with a link in the next 24 hours for them.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Greg.
Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.